Administration defending how events played out in Afghanistan last year, responding sharply to a new House Republican review that alleges President Biden had no real plan in conducting the withdrawal. Let's bring in Texas Republican Congressman Michael McCaul. He's ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which published that review. Congressman, thanks for being here.
No, thanks, Brett. Thanks for having me.
I read through your report, and basically it describes a very chaotic, unorganized, basically a mess at the U.S. military withdrawal in the final days. The White House is pushing back, saying that the president refused to send another generation of Americans to fight a war that should have ended long ago, and calls your report a partisan report riddled with mistakes. What do you say to that?
Well, they have not presented anything to Congress really since the collapse. They refused to cooperate with my investigation, even though we gave them ample opportunities. Many of their witnesses wouldn't talk to us. They important documents like this dissenting memo from the embassy, of the embassy employees, 23 of them, calling to the Secretary of State's attention that the situation was so dire that they needed to evacuate at that time. It was chaotic, Brett, because they didn't have a plan. They didn't listen to the intelligence community on the ground or our top military officials in the Pentagon, who kept telling me that this thing is going to happen fast, sooner rather than later. At the same time, State and White House are painting a very rosy picture and analysis. Remember, the president says they're not going to evacuate from helicopters off the embassy like Vietnam, and that was wrong. And his assessment that al-Qaeda has gone is absolutely wrong as well. And there are many more points I could make. Yeah. But at the end of the day, there was an offer to allow American forces and NATO to take over Kabul for purposes of evacuation. That was declined by the White House, and they put the Taliban in charge of the perimeter, which led to the chaos you're talking about, and the suicide bomber that killed 13 American servicemen and women.
Yeah. So leading up to that moment, as they're making a decision about U.S. force posture, have you found anybody inside the national security team who was on board with what the president said to get troops out completely? Have you, the CENTCOM commander obviously was recommending 2,500 troops, as was the defense secretary. I think the Secretary of State signed on, as did the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Is there anybody in the national security team that you all found that was buying into, let's pull them all out right away?
No, great question, Brett. The answer is none. And that goes from the chairman of Joint Chiefs, Milley, to CENTCOM commander, General McKenzie, who I've talked to extensively, to the intelligence community themselves. And most importantly, Brett, our allies. The president misled the American people, saying that our NATO allies were behind us. They were not, because they knew that a complete withdrawal would end up in this chaos and a basically unconditional surrender to the Taliban. And now we're seeing what that means. That means a reconstituting al-Qaeda. It means women left behind. It means 100,000 Afghan partners left behind that we promised we would protect, and we didn't. And we left them behind to be at the mercy of the Taliban as well. And there are still, Brett, 1,000 American citizens left behind enemy lines in Afghanistan.
How many of those want to leave? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, State will say they want to stay in Afghanistan. I mean, I have to ask the question, would you want to stay in Afghanistan right now, given the conditions on the ground? I think many of them want to get out. The issue, Brett, is they have family members that they want to bring with them, and the State Department's not allowing them to take their families with them. That's the real issue here.
You know, you talk about in this report the threat of Afghanistan becoming a jumping point for al-Qaeda or ISIS or terrorists overall moving forward. I want to take you now to your old job at House Homeland Security Committee, and this being what the southern border looks like. Just the stats out from Border Patrol, the terrorism screening database hits. In July, there were 10. In FY22, 66, and if that more than doubled from the previous 5 years combined. These are hits for terrorism screening along our southern border. How concerned are you about that, and what's happening about it?
Well, you're right. Chaired Homeland Security for 3 terms during the height of ISIS and the Caliphate. I got briefed almost on a weekly basis of external operations to kill Americans in the United States. We stopped 95% of those because we were able to hit those targets in Afghanistan and elsewhere. By the way, we don't have that. We don't have that ISR intelligence capability anymore. As McKinsey said, 99% is gone. Bagram Air Base is gone, and China's now moving into Afghanistan. To the border, when I chaired Homeland, I would always ask that question: how many special interest aliens have crossed? How many on the terror watch list? Always a focus of mine. And now that you're seeing a liberated Afghanistan for terrorists, if you will, to freely roam, Zawahiri, they claim to be a victory, and I applaud the intelligence community. But what it did demonstrate is they're back to the old game of harboring terrorists. And who was harboring Zawahiri? Mr. Haqqani himself, the Haqqani network, the #1 terrorist next to the top al-Qaeda leader, Zawahiri. The irony is unbelievable. And guess what his new cabinet position is? Haqqani is now the Minister of Interior, or Minister of Security for the Taliban. That border is wide open. They know they can get in through that southern border, and they are reconstituting. The White House, the fact that they are really coming after me shows me that we're doing something right. And they know that they are reconstituting al-Qaeda and ISIS-K, and they are misleading the American people about the threat. And that southern border is the easiest way for them to get in to conduct these external plots to kill Americans. It may take a year to reconstitute fully, but when you talk to McKinsey and Milley, they say 6 months to a year. McKinsey and Milley, the same ones that said you can leave 2,500 U.S. forces, 6,000 NATO, and keep Afghanistan stabilized, and also keep the intelligence there.
Congressman McCaul, we appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for having me.